guys. Hello and welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. So the last garden tour that we had, I had asked you guys, do you really want to see the process of us kind of converting our spring and summer garden into our fall and winter garden? And you guys said yes. So we are continuing our garden tours. They're going to be a little bit different because it's going to be a little less tour, though we will be going through the garden and harvesting, don't worry. But also there's going to be kind of a lot more work. You're going to kind of see the process of how we do things. And one of the things that we're currently doing right now is filling up this really deep 3-foot raised bed. It's 3 feet high, 6 feet long, and then 2 feet wide. One of the best ways to fill up a bed like this is to use like a Hugelkultur method. And Hugelkultur traditionally is in mounds. I believe it's not necessarily something that was done inside a container. It was just mounded up with logs and sticks and brush, and then finer and finer materials were added on top. And it's a good way to take up space while creating soil, because these logs and things eventually will break down. We'll have to add compost to the top as everything kind of settles, but it's a super economical way to get big beds filled. Levi's gonna go run and grab a bale of moldy hay from the back of our property. We had some hay go bad earlier in the year, and I can't be around mold, so he's gonna do the next layer with moldy hay. While he's doing that, I'm gonna go grab some buckets and gather up some of this gardener's gold here. Some rabbit manure. We have quite a lot of it here.
About 13 cents worth of diesel.
Well, good morning. It is actually the next day, and I don't know if you can tell, but there's actually already quite a bit of settling of all of the good things that we put in this bed. So initially we had started with some logs that we had from a fallen tree, like a tree that fell down years ago on our property. Those logs have already started to break down. I did have some leftover mulch from when I purchased mulch earlier in the spring. That has already started to kind of break down, so that's in there. We had some moldy hay that really isn't good for anything except for being nutrition for the garden, so that's under here. There's actually kind of a warmth where that layer is, and so that's breaking down nicely. And then this top layer is actually compost that we have made over years. So my compost pile, you saw it, it's weedy and grassy. It's not I mean, I guess it's a compost pile, but I haven't been turning it or anything. It's kind of just been like a stationary pile where we have put rabbit manure, we have put some spent hay over there, food scraps, things like that throughout the years. You'll notice this white powder that I have over the top here. This is diatomaceous earth. I don't know how much good it's doing right now because we did have some moisture settle in here, and moisture does really render diatomaceous earth kind of pointless. It takes away its effectiveness, but I noticed there's a whole bunch of pill bugs or roly-polies, and those guys are really bad for the garden, especially seeds and seedlings. They love to eat them up, so I've got to take care of those before I plant anything in here. If the diatomaceous earth isn't gonna do it, there's an organic product called, I think it's called Sluggo. I'll have to double check, but I need to get some of that and sprinkle some of that in here so that we're actually able to grow something this fall without the bugs eating it. I will have to keep coming back and layering on more soil as it inevitably compresses down and breaks down, but this is a really good start. So as far as an update goes in here for the greenhouse, I noticed that our Kalima bush beans have started to put on lots and lots of flowers. So we'll be getting beans from these plants very soon. I think there's 12 or 13 plants. So that's gonna equal a lot more beans for us. I've already met my bean canning goals for the year. I've been freeze drying beans. We've been eating them fresh. So this is awesome. There are some empty spaces down here where I used to have some squash. I used to have beans, but I've since cut those out. The bush beans that are still producing well, that have been producing for quite some time, are starting to kind of peter out, which is absolutely okay. Relatively soon, I will take these out. And when it comes to taking out bean plants, you can just pull them up and remove them, roots and all. But it's actually going to be more beneficial for your soil to cut the plant right at soil level and leave those roots in the ground. Especially with beans, there's nitrogen nodules on those roots that get left in the soil at that point and help feed the soil really well. And really that's true of any plant. The breakdown of the root structure is going to feed the microbiome in there. It's just especially great for beans because of those nitrogen nodules. And it's even better if you can do what's called chop and drop and just essentially compost the entire plant in the bed. That's not always possible, and sometimes where there's disease, that's ill-advised, but it's an option. This isn't too bad of a harvest. It's been probably 4 or 5 days since I made a harvest, and this would probably fill a gallon-sized freezer bag. Maybe. More than likely we'll eat these fresh. It's funny, every time I think our row of black-eyed peas is starting to slow down, I go and pick it and then I realize that it's not. There are still so many peas coming off of these plants, but they're still flowering. I had mentioned it in a recent video where I talked about our garden favorites from this year, that these black-eyed peas and the purple hull peas that we have on the other side are definitely a garden favorite of mine. That is absolutely true. I was looking recently into pea shellers because you can buy little contraptions that you can put the fresher peas like this through, and it, you know, pops out the peas and discards the shells. It's pretty slick. But anyways, in those videos, I noticed a lot of people will grow these varieties on the ground. They're not even trellised. This is my first year growing either of these two varieties, and so that was kind of cool to see the different growing methods for them. I think it's maybe easier to see your harvest when they're trellised, but it's pretty cool to know that you don't necessarily have to. I do have a few good-sized okra plants here in the greenhouse. This one is the Okinawa pink okra. I really like this variety. And then over here is the Alabama red. So I will normally harvest this way because I forget my shears. It's ideal to cut the pods off of the plant instead of just ripping them off like I've been doing. But I also saw somewhere, and I can't remember where this person was gardening from, but whenever they harvested an okra pod, they would also cut off the corresponding leaf. So the okra grows in like the armpit, or I think it's called the leaf node of the plant. So each okra pod kind of corresponds with its own leaf. So in theory, with the way that that person harvested, I'd be cutting off this leaf as well. And I've done that a little bit. You can see that I've thinned this plant out quite a bit, and the other ones down there as well. I'm not quite comfortable taking off all of the leaves after I've harvested the pods because I do want the plant to still have a sufficient amount of leaves in order to photosynthesize and live. But I do like this. It's helping with airflow. It's helping with harvesting. So they also will put out these kind of side arms and side shoots. So I've been leaving those on. See this one here? It started out as this one main stem, but then it has these side shoots here. So we've been harvesting okra and then cutting off some of the leaves. I'm kind of hoping that some of these get tall enough to touch the peak of the greenhouse. I don't know if they will, but we'll see. A lot of me just wanted to bypass walking down the lane today because it's dead, but we'll come down here. I noticed that some of these smaller birdhouse gourds over here have started to turn brown at the stems. I think that's a pretty good indication that I need to harvest them. Actually, some of the birdhouse gourds that are in the raised bed garden have started to fall, and those suckers are huge. So we might actually pull those down today. Down here on the end, there's actually quite a few watermelon. These are sugar baby watermelons that are still hanging on to their dead vine. I don't know if these got the chance to ripen before the vine died, but there is one way to know. Surprise, surprise. Looky there. Huh. Okay. So this one will go to the chickens, but the rest we can harvest. I'm not gonna be able to get those in this basket. They're not gonna be able to make it past here, so I'll have to come back for those. There's actually a little one on this side too. That one will fit. Right before I filmed our previous garden tour to this one, we had a huge heat wave and then a massive downpour, and the garden was really just looking kind of fried and waterlogged at the same time. I really didn't think it was gonna bounce back the way that it has, but especially this loofah gourd, that's all the green that you see, that has exploded in the last week or so. And I think it's because the birdhouse gourd that is obviously in here, you can see all these beautiful gourds. The foliage of that plant has really died back, and so the foliage of the loofah gourd has really had a chance to take over, and because of that, we are starting to see quite a lot of loofah, which makes me so excited. There's these big ones right here. All these loofah gourds I'm going to leave on the vine until they turn brown and crispy on the outside, and then we can harvest them for homegrown sponges. So as we walk through this lovely archway, which looks amazing with all these loofah blooms, looky here. It's one of our honeybees. I don't know if they're getting nectar or pollen, possibly both. To be honest, it looks like she's got her tongue in there, so likely she's getting some nectar. It's gonna be some interesting honey. So anyways, we've got these beds here that used to have corn in them, and I've since cleaned them out. And if you watched our last video, I did a crazy thing in these two beds right here where I just scattered seed throughout. So there are various brassica seeds in this bed here, mostly radishes. You can see we have had a decent level of germination, which is super exciting to see. And then in this bed here, I planted a lot of lettuces on the front end over there. And then back here is some Genovese basil. So this was super fun for me to see this carpet of germination here. I am gonna have to thin these out eventually. I'm gonna give them probably another week before I worry too much about that. But for now, it's really fun looking. So over here, this bed used to have our bantam sweet corn in it, and we do still have this lovely Alabama red okra. I have come through here and harvested and trimmed the leaves off like I talked about in the greenhouse. This plant is actually a lot bigger. This specific garden space here has been in the works for many, many years. I believe the person who owned the house before us put in this garden in 2015. And so the soil here is just much more rich. It's been worked a lot more. The plants in the greenhouse are doing great, but this guy, he's really showing them up. Anywho, down here, these are the seeds that we started a few weeks ago. We've got some lettuces here. I think this was my arugula. I can't remember what this is. I'm gonna have to look at my video. But we have some pak choi and some Swiss chard here. and then a little bit of spinach. I have noticed the last couple times that I've started seeds that the soil that you can buy at the store right now is severely lacking in what it used to be just a few years ago. I can't find a bagged soil that doesn't have super big barky pieces in it. And the issue with that is those barky bits are going to be using up the nitrogen within the soil in order to break themselves down. Now, as soon as that bark is broken down, that nitrogen is available to the plants, but not until that bark is broken down. So I have had issues where I can get my plants big-ish to a point and then they just stop growing without any added nutrition. I've actually fertilized the seedlings that are in these trays here a couple times, and that's the only reason that they are the size that they are, and they're still kind of puny. So what I'm doing with them right now is actually getting them used to the sunlight. I have had them inside my house under grow lights, but the sunlight is a lot more intense and I can't just thrust them straight out into the sun or I do risk having them burn. So they are getting used to the sun. I'm going to leave them out here for a few hours today, bring them back inside under the grow light, and then tomorrow I may actually get to plant them because we are expecting a couple days of rain and that intermittent cloud cover is really going to help them adjust as well. So for now, they're still in the seed trays, but by the next garden tour, they'll be in this bed. Hey, sweet girl. How you doing? So you see our garden kitty Remington there taking a bath on the corn stalks. She right now is our only garden kitty. We have two cats. We have Remington, who's 13. She has a long tail. And then we had Punt, who's a Manx. She was 12 when she passed away. Sorry guys, I thought I was ready to talk about that. Apparently I am not. So we've picked some peppers. I've talked about quite a few of these varieties in videos past. This gorgeous, gorgeous green California Wonder, our lovely snacking style peppers. But it's been a while since we harvested one of these. This is a violet sparkle pepper. I got these seeds from Baker Creek. I really like these. The plants don't get very big, and unfortunately I stuck it kind of in the middle of all of those peppers over there, and so the other peppers are sort of shading it out, so it's not producing as well as it could. But I really like these. So in contrast to your normal like snacking pepper, they are very thick-walled. So let's show an example. So you can see here, this pepper has a really decent wall thickness for its size. Actually, the violet sparkle really is not very much ahead of that, but it's one of my favorite things about this variety is that it does have a nice thick wall. Thick-walled peppers like that are great for stuffing. You can make like poppers or whatever. I really like that about a good pepper. There's a couple thinner-walled peppers that I really do like that we do need to harvest. So let's go get them. So back here in the peppers, we do have Sugar Rush Peach. That's here on the end. These guys are not sweet peppers. They are thinner walled, but I'm gonna leave these on for right now. I do have a little bit more hot sauce to make, but hiding a little bit under the foliage, we've got these guys. So these peppers look kind of scary, but I assure you they are not. They look like habaneros. These are habanadas. They are a heatless habanero. I will tell you that they're not entirely heatless, but they are very fruity and very good. See there how that wall is a little bit thinner? These guys are very, very good for snacking, but they probably wouldn't be good for like a stuffing pepper. I have fermented these before though, and they're very good that way too. Pretty sure that this is the only slicer tomato that's really ripe enough to harvest with you guys today. This is a Black Beauty. They do get a little bit bigger than this, but my plants are kind of crowded over here. Still beautiful. There's actually quite a few becoming ripe over here on the vine. Got this beauty. This is a Belgian Giant right here. Oh look. Saw a flash of pink. I had mentioned that I thought that maybe we would take down some of the birdhouse gourds today. I already have in this past week taken down a couple, and I may leave these guys. I feel comfortable with them up as long as the stem is still green. I know that these stems are super strong. See, the ones that I took off, their stems were brown. This one is definitely getting there. Let's see if it'll pull. Oh, yep. But you see how green this one is? That one's gonna be nice and strong, and so we can leave it up there. It's pretty. This stem is starting to turn. Oh. So yeah, we've begun the slow descent of the birdhouse gourds. I'm gonna leave these guys under this archway to start to cure for the same reason that I didn't want to just thrust those baby seedlings out into the sun. I don't really want to cure these straight in the sun. I do worry about them getting a little bit of a sun scald, and sometimes when plants like pumpkins and melons get a sun scald spot on them, that spot can essentially rot and degrade and introduce mold and what have you. And we don't want that to happen to these guys. They are not touching the soil underneath here, so they should cure just fine right where they're at. Thank you guys so much for joining me in the garden today. If you missed the video where I talked about our favorites from this gardening season, I'm gonna stick that up here. And I also made a video about how we make our fermented hot sauce with our Sugar Rush peach peppers. You can also use jalapenos or any hot pepper that you like. That video is gonna be right down here.